All right, good afternoon, good morning. Oh, no, it's afternoon here too. Good afternoon and welcome to the Franchise Time Machine. This is an unusual, oh, hold on, I have the wrong title up here. It's an unusual daytime stream for me. There we go. Episode 60. Yeah, Gumbricules. Hey, Ryan. Hello to you. Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the chat. Gumbricules, yeah, I noticed that there was no one streaming, so I thought I'd try to give people some drops. I believe Dr. Dynastic is going to be going on this afternoon, but I don't know, there's been some craziness with the scheduling the last couple days, so I just thought I'd try to help out, help people get some drops, and just bridge the gap until someone else comes on. I'm going to keep half an eye on uh, Twitch to see when someone else comes on, but if anyone sees on, please let me know, and I'd be happy to raid you on over to them. Especially if it's Dr. Dynastic. I think that gets us back into the regular programming, and it'll help us get
Why
back
do
on
you keep
track.
following me around?
Christopher Richard Ferrand, thank you for the follow. Appreciate it. So I usually stream at around 10 p.m. Pacific time into the overnight, and so most of you probably have not seen me stream, but I do a lot of I say fun things. Some people say weird things in the base game. And I try to take full advantage of all the different things you can do in the base game, mostly importing players across history, bringing them into 2023 a lot of times to do things. Let me see if I can show you some examples. Yeah, the night after Willie Mays passed away, in his honor, I brought four versions of Willie Mays into 2023 to join the Mets and see how the Mets could do. And if you ever doubt um, how crazy the AI can be. So I bring four different versions of Willie Mason to 2023 thinking, okay, he can play all three outfield positions in DH. And but I like to leave most of the decisions up to the AI just for kind of consistency, um, and also,
Why do
frankly,
you
so
keep
I don't
following
have to
me
focus on a
around?
billion things while I'm streaming. And oh, thank you, Hip and Needok for the follow. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. And what the AI did was sent one of the Willie Mays. So these are four peak Willie Mazes, peak versions of Willie Mays. Either like an MVP season or definitely like an All-Star season. Four of his best seasons ever. And the AI sends one of the Willie Mazes to the reserve roster. Doesn't even put him on the roster. So if you ever get upset at your AI in a tournament, just think about that. So I even have an emote for when that happens. That I've got an AI gonna AI emote. Actually, so for those of you who just followed, you'll have this emote too. So yeah, so that's one example. Another example is I'll do themes, like when Paul Sporer introduced the R.D. Wilson card. Um, hey, Sibo 49er, you know what? That's where he ended his career, so I have no problem showing that picture. Um, for R.D. Wilson, Paul Sporer mentioned a story about how R.D. Wilson lost a finger in a machinery accident and still went on to have a very not just productive, but actually a stellar Negro League career. And it actually turns out it's his right thumb. So let me pause for ads here. All right, and we're back. Um, so yeah, Artie Wilson. So Paul Sport told us where how he lost his
Why do you keep
lost a
following me
finger.
around?
Turns out it was his right thumb. So if you can imagine trying to play high level baseball without a thumb. But anyway, that gave me the idea of let me find some other major leaguers who lost fingers and put them all
Why do
on
you
the
keep following me around?
2023 Mets. Maxwell's Hammer and your alts. Thank you for the follow. Uh, Lowry 6850. Thank you for the follow.
Why do
Appreciate
you keep following me around?
it. So yeah, so five different major leaguers who lost fingers, brought them all together into the 2023 Mets. And then I also have this ongoing save if anyone ever wants to check this out. It's Team NSFW. It's some of the dirtiest sounding baseball names from across history.
Why do you keep
So
following me
our cover
around?
players for this episode were Charlie Furbush and Doug Fister. So I stream kind of late at night, so I figured it's okay to do that. And it's their actual names, so, no harm.
Why do you keep following me around?
Is it Norigar49 or No Rager49? Thank you for the follow. And one more time, 6. Thank you for the follow. So yeah, that's an ongoing save. That's been pretty fun to do. On that one, I do play by play because part of the fun is like seeing all the players and hearing all the names interact. Just an example, there's a Dick Burns. There's Charlie Sexauer. I like to think of he's the answer to the question, what time is it? Sexauer. Uh yeah, so that's an ongoing save. And of course Johnny Dickshot is one of the captains. But he's been pretty well known since I started playing Perfect Team 24 last year. He had a pretty playable card at the lower levels. Um, Here's a fun experiment I do in the editor function of the base game. If you haven't played base game before, editor's really fun. You can go in and kind of see what's ratings. You can see like all the numbers that go into the players' ratings that result in their performance, and you can also you can change them. So you can make a player whatever you want them to be. So one of the things I do is I called it raise the roof, raise the floor. I would take 100 points and add them either to the worst attribute or the best attribute to a certain number of players on the team. So I tried it in 2020 OTP 25. The rating system is different. Instead of 1 to 250, it goes to 1 to 550. So instead of 100 points, I had to add 220 points. But it was still the same idea. And took 10 of the Texas Rangers from 1990 and, improved one of their um, attributes like greatly and to see what would happen. So the reason I chose the 1990 Rangers was they had a lot of fun players like Julio Franco, Pete Incaviglia, and one of my favorites, Nolan Ryan. But also it had Bobby Witt. This is Bobby Witt Senior, I guess you would call him. And he had a super live arm, but had really terrible control. And when you look at his early stats, they seem like they could be comparable to early Nolan Ryan. And so I always felt like, man, if this guy could get some control, he could be really good. And so I started with the idea of let's add control to him. It turns out here's a little insight into how the base game works, and the simulation engine for the Perfect Team is also pretty similar, so it might be helpful knowledge. Um, in the base game, as you change people's attributes in editor, well, here I can show you how that works. Um, let's pull up the base game. I'll just show you what we're talking about here. Okay, here's a sim we did last night. If you go into any player, you go to editor,
Why do you
Right? The
keep
bio has
following
a
me
lot of stuff like
around?
their just general um, information about the player, also their injury proneness. But if you go, for example, the pitching ratings, right? There's a section here on the right
Why do
that
you
shows
keep
you,
following me
based on the
around?
current ratings, how would they perform in a major league environment? And as you change things, these ratings will change. So, for example, if I up his velocity from 89 to 94, like let's look, his opponent batting average right now is 3.12, and his projected ERA is 5.57, right? 3.12, 5.57. If I take this all the way up to 100 plus, 3.01, 5.20. So you can see like it makes a difference, but not a huge difference. But if I give him a circle change, and let's make it a 550 circle change, batting average goes down to 230, and his ERA becomes a 3. So I jumped ahead to the punchline. What we figured out during the course of the stream was, for pitchers, nothing makes them better than giving them a 550 level off speed pitch. Now I'm only giving 220 points. So the best we could do with Cornejo here is we can take this to 305. Right. So for him, it doesn't make as much of a difference. He can only get down to a 303 opponent batting average and a 5.31 ERA, because he just doesn't have the the starting point that can get him to that kind of cheat code level off speed pitch. But for the players who did, it made a huge difference. And so
Why do you
that's a
keep
little insight
following me
into the
around?
base game, but also shows you how you can play with some stuff in the base game and have some fun. Daglord 47, Zerhab, and Yummies. Thank you for the follows. Appreciate it. So so in that case, it ended up not being Bobby Witt's control that we changed. I just gave him a kind of supernatural changeup. And across the pitching staff, I kept tracking that projected performance to see which attribute to change. Almost without exception, it was the off-speed pitch. So if you can imagine peak Nolan Ryan with a circle change that's the best circle change in the world, it's completely unfair, and it ended up working out that way too. Well, you know what? So suppose you play perfect team because you're here for drops. I should also share with you the biggest way to improve the batters, just like the changeup or the off-speed pitch for the pitchers. The batters experience the biggest improvement if you just boost their power. And one of the reasons for that is, contact, which is a combination of BABIP and avoid K. Contact leads to kind of how well they're going to hit, so it leads to their batting average. But contact does not include the hits from home runs. So if you give a person a big boost in power, let's say they hit 40 more home runs, those are not accounted for in their contact. So whatever their average is from contact, you would add those additional 40 home runs as
Why do
40
you
more
keep
hits.
following me around?
And so 40 hits in a major league season is a huge boost to your batting average. So what ended up happening, Meandin, thank you for the follow. I apologize if I pronounced your username wrong there. So what happened was, someone like Pete Incaviglia, who's at best like a mid 200s hitter, I boosted his power to the max. He ends up hitting, 20, 30 more home runs. But those hits also get added to his batting average. I think ultimately, I think he ended up being like a 330 hitter with 50 home runs. Boom. Thank you. I guess I am a 24-hour streamer at this point. Welcome back to the time machine. And then people like Julio Franco, who already hit for average, you boost his power, he's suddenly, like a triple crown threat. So that was really fun to see how those changes to their attributes resulted in changes to their results. So that's another example of like fun little experiments I do in the base game. Um, and a lot of times it's just kind of roster building. So in this series of episodes, I built a roster of my all-time favorite major leaguers. Now I couldn't just take all my favorites because I need two catchers, I need 12 pitchers. I have to fill a playable roster. But for the most part, it's my favorite major leaguers, and we brought them into uh 2023 again onto the Mets to see how they would do. Um, and my intent wasn't to just try to break the game. My intent was to use them as kind of a baseline. They were a baseline for another two experiments I was going to do. I wanted to bring them back as 50-year-olds, and then bring them back as 50-year-olds, and also bring them back as 15-year-olds, so 5-year-olds. And but I needed a baseline, so I brought them in at their peak seasons first. And the peak all-time favorites team won 153 games in 156 games. So at some point, building these rosters, it almost becomes not fun because they're too good. Um, I actually had the most fun building a recent roster where I was trying to put together the worst team I could find um, for this. So there's this issue. I don't want to get into too much detail. You should watch last night's video on demand. Not trying to plug my own stream here, but
Why do you keep
there's this
following me
thing that happens
around?
in the base game, and my understanding is it happens in Perfect Team too, where the game engine. Bill Pitt, thank you for the follow. The game engine basically is trying to play towards a set of totals. Yes, I'm tooting my own horn. And so the analogy that was given to me, and it's a really good one, is if wrong
Why do you
Eeyore.
keep
Oh, I'm glad you
following me
caught that,
around?
Fabricades. I'm kind of a stickler for that, but I wasn't going to call it out on stream. Pause refresh. Thank you for the follow. It's cool seeing all these people I see in other people's streams joining in and following. I appreciate that. Um, so the analogy was if you bring a whole team, if you bring just a league of Babe Ruths into the game, they're not all going to hit 50 home runs. In fact, they're all going to hit 20 home runs. And the reason is because the base game, here I can even show you. I don't want to, again, I'm not going to go too far down this path because for some of you it's going to be very boring. But also, like, I've covered it a lot in some recent streams, so I don't want to bore people who actually have been watching some of my streams. But if you go to the league settings and under stats, right, the game manages towards a certain number of home runs and doubles. And this is why when you play in a low home run era, players don't hit a lot of home runs. And when you hit in a high strikeout era, people strike out a lot. Because these multipliers or modifiers on the right adjust the total number of home runs, hits, whatever that the game is trying to manage towards. Right. So if you don't adjust this and you just flood the league with Babe Ruth, well, everyone's hitting home runs, but they're all dividing up the same pie of home runs. So instead of that's why all the Babe Ruths don't hit 50. They can only each hit like 20. The other way to think about it, which is the way I think about it, is if you only have Babe Ruth, then Babe Ruth is the average player, and the average player hits 20 home runs. However you look at it, that's kind of how the game works. It was surprising to me. I think it's surprising to a lot of people. Anyway, to try to counteract that, I tried to build a team of the worst players I could find. Um, and I've created an experimental sandbox for that. And that's what we did last night. So you can check that out if you
Why do
want
you
to.
keep following me
Um,
around?
Ian, is it Ian Iachimo? Thank you for the follow. Again, I apologize if I'm saying any of these usernames wrong. So anyway, that building that team was actually more fun to me. It ended up being more fun than building this roster. Um, Actually, people seem to have a good time seeing that roster. So let me show you some of the players who are on it in case you're interested. I apologize if the white is a little blinding to you after all the dark screens backgrounds, but so some of these names might pop out. And again, I picked the worst season for each of these players' careers, and so it was just fun looking up close. I was close on that one. Glad to hear it. Yeah, welcome to the stream. Welcome to the chat. So, and this is the third version of this. Like every time I did a sim, I would pick out the players who were almost too good. And the reason too good is a problem is if this team is setting the baseline for that universe, then if they're too good, whoever you bring in is not going to perform as well as you expected them to, right? So in this example, if we bring in two teams of Babe Ruth, I would bring in two teams of these players to try to balance it out. But if someone on this team is hitting too many home runs, then those Babe Ruth, instead of hitting 50 home runs, they might only hit 40 home runs, right? And so we want to let Babe Ruth be like Babe Ruth. So I tried to find the worst seasons I could. And this is kind of where we're at now. And this was a really fun roster to build. Had a lot of participation from chat, which is not always easy at, when you're getting on to midnight Pacific time. But people seem really engaged with this. We had a lot of fun with it. Um, even like now, people will still weigh in with their favorite bad seasons to see if they can make the cut. Um, so yeah, this was a lot of fun. So anyway, bringing this team of all-time greats, uh, talk about doing weird things in the base game. The next thing I did was, okay, let's bring them back as 50-year-olds. And the game engine was not kind. They won 2 games and 7 games as 50-year-olds. The reason they even won 7 games is I turned off what's called
Why do you keep following me around?
recalc. 10 Cent Brain. Oh, GT Sundown, aka Sundown GT. Thank you for the follow. GT Sundown, I know from the chats, he
Why do you
also went to
keep
Georgia
following
Tech
me
like I did
around?
for, that's where I went to undergrad. Brydav00, thank you for the follow. Yeah, GT Sundown, I'm streaming during the day for a change. I've got a little bit of flexibility these next couple weeks, and I noticed there was a gap in the drops. So I thought I'd jump in and help people out with their drops until I think Dr. Dynastic, it sounds like he's going to go on at the top of the hour. So as soon as he goes on, I will raid you on over there. My intent is not to step on anyone's toes. It was just to make sure everyone was getting their drops today. So I will get you on over there. I was just giving people kind of an overview of what I do in the base game. So anyway, yeah, the way we got the 50-year-old all-time greats to 7 wins is I turned off what's called recalc. If you don't play a lot of base game, the way recalc works is every season the game recalculates players' attributes based on what they did in the next season, right? And so the example I like to use is Brady Anderson with the Orioles. He like suddenly hits 50 some home runs, right? So the previous year he would have a profile of like an average center fielder, and then when you get into his 50 home run season, recalc would as Denny says, my intent is to self-aggrandize and always be on. Ezra, since you are the only one brave enough to call me out and my raging ego, I have to destroy you somehow. My army of original Matt Richie Andersons and I will have to destroy you. Yeah. So if you turn recalc off, then the base game tries to figure out, wh- you know, they'll just try to figure out a pathway to get to their peak rating, so the peak potential. Um, By the way, did I say original Richie Ashburn? I think I might have said Richie Anderson because I was thinking of Brady Anderson. So for those of you who don't know, The reason I talk about Richie Ashburn when Ezra Denny comes on is Ezra usually streams before me in the evenings and is kind enough to raid into me almost all the time, which I really appreciate. He is doing a 1959 San Francisco Giants save, and original Matt Richie Ashburn is still on the Phillies at that point, and constantly gives Ezra Denny's Giants a hard time, and so I always like to remind him of that. Ezra says one cannot aggrandize that which is already great. That's kind of like when people say it's not being paranoid if it's true. Um, yeah. So when I turned recalc off, what I realized what it was doing when in the 2-win season was uh, when it came time to start the season, it would go to recalc their stats or their attributes, and it would see that they haven't been playing Major League Baseball. So it automatically give them minimum ratings. But when I used recalc off, what it did was it calculates from their peak, which is very high. We're talking like peak Hank Aaron, peak Willie Mays, peak Tom Seaver, right? So since the peak is so high and it calculates a downward trajectory from that to age 50, there's enough residual ability that they were able to win 7 games. So then I wanted to do the reverse and say, okay, what happens? What does the game engine do when we make it 15-year-olds? Now this time I had the benefit of knowing to avoid recalc. So I turned recalc off for this. And also the 15-year-olds are actually closer probably in performance to their peak than the 50-year-olds because they might be younger, but they should be kind of on the upswing, and they've probably been playing baseball, even if it's high school baseball, whereas the 50-year-olds have been done for a while. So they won 12 games. Then, and this is where it's great having an active chat in the streams. Chat recommended that we turn up their development. So again, I'll show you in the game. There's a place where you can. Where is it? This is one I don't use as often, so it might take me a second to find it.
Why do you keep following me around? Look.
Juice of Troy, thank you for the follow. Um, where is it? If someone in chat remembers, I just did this last night too, and I still couldn't find it last night either. If someone remembers where it was, please let me know. I thought it was under players. I thought it was under stats and AI, right next to the league totals. Anyway, there's there's a number, and the baseline is 1.00 for player aging, and so that's how fast they decline from their peak. And there's one for player development, which is how quickly they get to their peak. And the idea was let's crank up the player development number, and so we turned it up to 9,999. I don't think there's a limit to how high we could take it, but oh, here it is. Here it is. Player development settings. Um, in this one, player development was turned off. If you turn it back on, you can adjust these. Right. And so we took the batter, not the batter aging, because that's the decline, but the batter development, we cranked up to 9,909. And we did the same for the pitchers. So when we did that, we actually ended up having the team started like 0-20, much like their predecessors did. But they started developing during the course of the season. They developed so fast that they were playing like peak versions of themselves by mid-season, and they almost caught up. They missed the playoffs by 4 games, and by by the postseason, they would all have been like this 153 win team. They were at their peak already, even as, 15, 16 year olds. And so I think if they had made the postseason, they would have won the World Series. So yeah, that's just some of the examples of the things I do in the base game. So let me just check real quick before I go into the sim I was going to do, if Dr. Dynastic is on yet or not. Oh, he is on, so I'm going to raid you on over there, okay? But just to give you an idea, the sim I was going to do, um, well, cheaters or cheaters, it's Fertile PNW. Yeah, or there's not a lot of cheaters in the base game because everyone could just use editor. So you don't have a lot of funneling and stuff going on. Um, but what I was going to do is I was going to build a roster of all the secret catchers in the perfect team. And then if I couldn't fill the roster, I was going to look in baseball history. But like the Walken Fusses and the Carlos Santanas and the who else? Geechee Meredith, that all have like a secret catcher rating. Um, I was going to make a roster all full of all of those. Since that seems like kind of consistent with what I do. All right, I'm going to rate y'all into Dr. Dynastic. Have a great time over there. I hope I help you get your drops today. And again, I usually stream at 10 p.m. Pacific time, so other than Wednesdays. So if you ever need late night drops, come find me.